Welcome to the Capital News. Today is July 4th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. Since it is America's birthday, I want to take the time to read today the Declaration of Independence. I'm not going to read this document in its entirety. It is a little bit lengthy, definitely worth the read, but I'm taking the time to read it because most people, I do not believe, have actually taken the time to read it, or if if they did, it was years and years ago when they were in school. But this is a very important document. It's a founding document. It is the founding document. It declares our independence. This document has personal meaning to me as well. When I was in college, I went to school for finance and economics. And I approached the university because I wanted to take more courses in economics. There was a handful of other courses that seemed pretty interesting to me, and I wanted to take those over some of these other electives that I had to take. I said, "Can I switch this up? Look, how many more courses like this can I take that are in the humanities or something, this, that, or the other?" Well, of course, it was like fighting City Hall, and they said, "No, you can't do it. You need to be," their words, "more well-rounded." Okay, all right. So I couldn't fight it anymore, so I said, okay, I give in. What courses are available? And they showed me the list and this, that, and the other. I said, okay, well, look, here's a lot of history courses. I always liked history. If I have to be, quote unquote, more well-rounded, let's do these courses. Okay, so I took these courses. There were probably several history professors in the department, but I only had the same professor for multiple history classes because I had to take all these electives. Very good professor, very good books that we went through. A lot of it was self-taught because I was doing a lot of this online. And his tests were all essay-based, which I like because I love to write. And we all learn differently, but the best ways that I learn are by doing it, by reading, and then by writing. Because I think when you're forced to write, you have to come up with a succinct argument. You have to put down your best argument. And since this was online, the tests were timed, so I had to know what I was talking about, and I had to get it done, which was absolutely okay. But in the course of me going through these courses and really focusing on American history, I fell in love with the founding of this country. Because of our founders, their passion for freedom, their passion for understanding, and their belief in humanity, that people can govern themselves, that they do not need a king, they do not need a queen, they don't need a dictator, they don't need a tyrant to tell them what to do, how to do it, when to do it. They just need the opportunity to govern themselves. And what an experiment that has been. So let me take the time to read some of this. Again, I'm not going to read it in its entirety because a lot of it has to deal with the founders airing their grievances. And as you can imagine, there were quite a few issues that they had with the crown of Great Britain. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Now they go on and they continue with about a few dozen issues that they have with Great Britain. Please take the time to read them. Of course, we already know a lot of them. High taxation, no representation, but they go through a whole litany. So please take the time to understand what these actual issues were. But there's a few things I do want to wrap up here in the Declaration of Independence because there's some other things, obviously, that are quite important. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions due in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. The Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. Signed by over 50 men representing the 13 colonies. Let us pray that their names, that these words are never forgotten. This podcast, this website, the Capital News, is all about peace and prosperity. It's about freedom. And with this, I do my best to educate this audience to the best of my ability on the political going-ons here in the United States and around the world, and of economic news that affects us all one way or another and ultimately affects the course of our politics. You cannot separate politics from economics. You can't separate what's taking place in society from economics. Looking back in 1776, to provide for historical context, the many, many issues that our founding fathers had with the British Crown, it's almost pales in comparison to what we face today, even though we call ourselves Americans, even though we call ourselves free people. There's still a lot of truth to us being free. But when you look at a handful of institutions the amount of power that they wield, the amount of laws and regulations that exist at every level of government, federal, state, and local, and then you look at the complaints of our founding fathers, I would have to think that our founders would say, my goodness, what we have today is King George couldn't imagine doing this to the United States of America, to those 13 colonies. Didn't have the imagination. There's no way he could have come up with all this stuff that we have put ourselves through on a daily basis. It's unfortunate that a lot of people in this country haven't taken the time to read our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists, those papers, which succinctly you had the Federalists who were arguing, okay, we need a central government. It needs to be powerful, but it needs to be limited. And then you had the Anti-Federalists who were saying we don't need a central government. This can be decentralized. We will be the United States of America, but we'll leave it with the states. And we'll trade and we'll travel and we'll talk with each other. And that's how we'll stay united. Well, obviously the Federalists won. And maybe I'll do a series on this podcast and we'll go through a lot of that history as well, because it's fascinating. These were the arguments, though. Small, limited federal government or no federal government? Can you imagine what our founders would say if they saw Bernie Sanders on stage? Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren? The list goes on and on. And this isn't just picking on Democrats. What about the Republicans, too? We have $23 trillion in debt. This didn't just happen overnight. But most of it happened over the last 20, 30 years. So where did we go wrong? What is taking place? Have we forgotten our history? I would argue that we have. It's only ever an election away. These are only words on paper. The only thing that gives them meaning, the only thing that gives them value is us. If we choose to believe them. If we choose to hold them as sacred. If we don't, we'll lose it. And I think with what's going on around the world, what's taking place in the United States of America, it is unfortunately slipping away. Too many distractions, too focused on work and productivity and GDP and what the stock market's doing, not focused on each other, not focused on family, not focused on society, not focused on humanity. This document and other founding documents for this country were not about economic gain and possession. It was about freedom. It was about saying we have the ability to govern ourselves, that we have the right and the ability to live the lives that we want to live. Who's obsessed with economic numbers? The state is. Governments are, because they use them as their justification to remain in power or to argue that we need a shift, that the other party needs a chance. It's just the wrong people. It's always just the wrong people. Our founders knew this. That's why they said, we don't need a dictator. We don't need a king. We'll make these decisions collectively. Now we're talking about giving everybody's money to everybody else for goods and services, and we're saying that it's a right, as if you have the right to somebody else's labor when you're talking about health care and receiving medical care. How do you have a right to somebody's labor? Sounds like slavery to me. You don't have a right to their labor. Somebody went through school to become a doctor, a nurse, whatever their skill is. You don't have a right to their labor. It's very simple. But because people have not taken the time to understand the founding of this country, what it actually means to be an American, not that you are just in the United States of America. To be an American is an idea. What does that idea stand for? You either agree with it or you don't. You're either a part of this club or you're not. You're free to go. But when people are up there talking openly about socialism, that has nothing to do with freedom. That has nothing to do with the United States of America. Get out. Because we have people who are serious presidential contenders and other politicians. And what do you think is going to happen? You think this is going to get worse? Meaning there's even going to be more of them calling for it? You have people who rally, who give their hard-earned dollars to people who claim to be socialists or want to enact socialist policies. How can this be in the 21st century? It's because we forget our history. And when you forget your history, how are you supposed to know where you're supposed to go? That's why I do my best here when I have these more type of serious conversations with this, to provide as much historical context as I can, because I think that's important when putting together an argument. Most of the time, that is rarely ever the case in modern day politics. It's talking points, it's high-paid consultants and marketing agencies coming out and saying you use these keywords and you'll get an applause from the zombies out there who are so doped up on illegal drugs, alcohol, antidepressants. Just use these keywords and they'll start applauding like crazy. And you watch the debates and sometimes they're not even putting a sentence together, but they use a key word and people start applauding. It's like we're Pavlov's dogs here. Ring that bell and the people start to salivate. They have no idea the danger that is right in front of us. You can say I'm being hyperbolic. You can say I'm being dramatic. I don't think so. Because I understand the history of what our founders were up against. I understand recent history all over the world, whether that's in Asia, whether that's in Europe, whether that's in South America, Latin America, whether that's in African nations. It's all over the world. It's so easy to give up. It's so easy to say, I don't want to be responsible for this. Let's have a dictator just tell me what to do. It's so much easier. I can just get up out of bed and I don't have to worry about a thing. Yeah, I might be spied on all day. I might not have too many rights. But this guy's going to tell me what to do. And everything I work for is just going to go to the government and then it'll be given back to me some way or another. That's not how it works. If that's really what you want, I feel bad for you. I really do. But if that's what you want, leave the United States of America because this is not the place for you. It isn't. And it is a true shame. It's appalling. And it's outright scary that people listen to somebody like Bernie Sanders and actually think he makes sense. But again, why is this? Because they don't understand history. They might understand a few words in here. They might not even understand them. But you could probably go to most kids, elementary school even, junior high, high school, and they've probably heard of the Declaration of Independence. At least I hope they have. But anything in it, they probably only remember life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, what does that mean? Why did Thomas Jefferson write that? What was he talking about? Where did that come from? Why is that important? Is it important? You're supposed to go through school to be taught how to think, not what to think. Who's in charge of our school system? Well, the government is. So do you find it surprising that so many young people, and even older people, don't understand what's going on? That they don't value these documents, that they just think, well, it's some old guy who's long been dead. He was a slave owner. He was white. He's old. He just wanted to protect what was his. All this stuff was just a front. They didn't mean it. This is the spin that you have out there from the left about the founding of this country. That our founding fathers, they were just white old guys, slave owners, landowners. They just wanted to protect what was theirs. All of these documents, just a charade. Smoke and mirrors. It's ridiculous. If that's truly what you think, then I don't know why these people still stay here. Leave. Because the solutions that they put forth would destroy this country. Because they've destroyed every other country where they've been instituted. So this upsets me, but that's why I do this podcast. Right now, the audience is limited, but I hope it grows. Because it needs to. Because people need to understand the history of this country. They need to understand the history of so many things that we talk about here. Recently, we have been talking about all of this escalation between the United States of America and Iran. Well, maybe it would be important to understand some of the historical context of this relationship between the United States and Iran. Maybe it would be important to understand the historical context between the United States and North Korea. And so many other things that we talk about here on a daily basis. That's true of the economic podcast as well. The Federal Reserve, Wall Street, the banking system, how it's organized, why it's organized the way that it is. There's so much that we have to discuss. Because there's so much that needs to be discussed. And it needs to be questioned. Is this the best way? Is this the best solution? Maybe some things that we have in place are, or they're very good. Others, not even close. So why can't we keep the good and get rid of the bad? And improve upon the good and make it even better? That's what we're supposed to do. That's what the Declaration of Independence said to do. To make it better. I think right now we're in the 21st century, and we need another Declaration of Independence. Because what our government has done to us, and what we have allowed our government to do to us, is a crime in and of itself. It is our responsibility, it is our duty, it is our obligation to remove tyrannical governments. Not around the world, but here at home. Happy 4th of July, everybody. I hope you all had a safe and enjoyable 4th with your friends and family. Again, may we never forget the words of our founding fathers. Keep them in memory. Keep them in action, because once they are forgotten, the United States of America will cease to exist. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to have you back again. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.